Hi, everybody, and welcome to our first bonus call for Ignite. This is the first year in our fifth cohort that I had this inkling that this is something I felt like I wanted to do. Based on the questions that come in every week in every cohort on Ignite, there are certain themes that keep coming up, certain topics that I can see women are really curious about, they want to know more about. And I have friends and I have colleagues who specialize in this work. And here I am trying to catch up with all of your questions on the Q&A, answer them all, give you really, really good responses, make you feel like you're seen and you're heard and you're taken care of. But there are other people out there who do amazing work. I mean, Ignite is really, we just finished week 6. And I know a lot of you are not caught up yet. You have home play to do, right? And we keep the course open for an additional 8 weeks for you guys to catch up and re-listen to some of the lectures. But by this point, as hard as you have worked and as much as you have gotten out of Ignite, I'm pretty sure that all of you know that you have barely touched the tip of the iceberg. And for those of you who are coming back for a second, third, fourth year, fifth year, right? At this point, we have people who are their fifth time. You're nodding with me because you know that the second time you do Ignite, it's very different than the first time and the third time and the fifth time, and Emir Hashem next year, the sixth time. And there's a limit. There's a limit to what Ignite can give you. And what I hope that Ignite gives people, if I can hope for one thing, just one thing, well, can I make it two? Okay, so if it's two things, I want women to have confidence, just a lot of confidence. They should know that they're not crazy and they should learn to listen to themselves. But number 2 is there's so much out there. I want women to walk out of my courses, whether it's Vessel or Ignite, with insatiable curiosity. I want women to recognize that there's so much more that they don't know, and there's a lifetime of learning ahead of them, and not in a place of being depressed, like, oh my, what else don't I know? But from a place of excitement. You mean my life can get exponentially better and richer if I just apply myself a little bit and learn these little avenues or little side roads of exploration that I never thought to go on, and that's why we're here. So I'm really excited to get into our conversation with Nechama. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a background before I pin Nechama's video to the screen, and I'll let her take it away. So I'll tell you a little bit about Nechama. Nechama and I know each other since we're kids. We went to the same camp. We were not friends when we were in camp, not because we didn't like each other, just, we just kind of knew each other, of each other. Nechama, you're not even my age, right? You're my sister's age.
I'm not. I was your sister's age. Yeah. And look,
Right.
how you're saying, like, we go back to when we were kids. Actually, we don't. I don't
We
really
don't.
know you.
I always knew your face, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, so we've kind of like,
general.
right. We were in each other's orbits ever since we were a child. I would say it more like that. And then very serendipitously, we ended up in each other's orbits again as adults when we ended up in the same gym, which to me is really important. I think all of your real friends are the friends you make in the gym because they see you on your bad days. They see you sweating. They smell you sweating. Like, who else are you going to lay on the floor with and like scissor your legs open and closed, and like huff and puff and, bend over in really tight leggings. So the people that you become friends with in the gym, I mean, be nice to them. Like stay with them for a long time because they know what you look like in leggings, and you just really want to keep it in the gym. So Nechama and I reconnected in the gym as adults, and of course, in the gym you don't just work out. There's a lot of things happening in the gym. There's a lot of schmoozing. And when I was in school for intimacy and sexuality, Nechama was literally right there, hearing my daily updates every day. And Nechama was actually the one who really pushed me to start this course. She was very curious about all of the stuff that I was learning. She was very excited about it. And she was getting very like, okay, this has to come out here. Why aren't more women talking about these things? In case you're wondering what my gym is like, it's very sexy. I just gotta say, there's a lot of educational information happening there. We're a group of women.
It's almost its own sex school.
Yeah. We're a group of women who've been working out probably like 7-8 years at this point, and it's like a bungalow colony, except it's the gym. Yeah. And Nechama was really the one who pushed me, and in fact, Nechama was the one who named it Ignite. You know, I think we had just been throwing different words in a conversation, and the ignite must have come up. I don't know if it was me or Nechama who like put out the word ignite, and Nechama made a flyer, like a mock-up with the word ignite. And I'm like, when I saw it on paper, when Nechama had written it out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. And that was it. And literally after Nechama made that mock-up flyer in her notebook, and she's like, Fally, I'm just showing my friends this flyer. That's it. You're doing this course, whether you know it or not. The minute I saw that flyer, I'll never forget it. My husband was away. He was away on a workshop, so he was away from Thursday to Sunday. In those 4 days, from Thursday to Sunday, I wrote your entire playbook. Yes, for those of you who were here last year, you know that the playbook actually doubled in size a year ago. It got very much revamped, last year. But for the first 3 cohorts of Ignite, that playbook was written in 4 days, over one weekend, sparked by Nechama's ad. You see me here 5 years later, but I'll tell you what Nechama did in the last 5 years. She wasn't content to just let me do all the teaching because she felt called to this work as well. And she went on her own deep dive into this work, whether it was sexuality, tahara samashpacha, breathwork training, and hypnotherapy training, in addition to all the other trainings that Nechama has under her belt. Nechama is a life coach and other things. Nechama will tell you all about herself in a moment. And I'm just really excited. I'm really excited to have her here on this call because I feel like you see how much I give in these courses. And there comes a point where I have to be honest, like I can give and I can give and I can give, but I cannot save the world. And we need all of us. We need every woman who is stepping up and saying, hey, I also have a chelek in this. I also have what to offer. I can't do it all. I don't want to do it all. I'm not great at doing it, believe it or not. I know you think I'm great at doing everything. I'm just great at showing you all the sides that I'm great at. And I'm just very good at keeping what I'm not good at off the calls. So I just look like I have it all together. But anytime there's someone who does something better than me, I bring her in because I want you to know that this exists.
I'm just gonna say, I'm really glad that part got recorded. Okay.
Yes, yeah. I'm okay saying it. I'm not okay showing you. Yeah. I'm not gonna let you see my messy kitchen, but I'll tell you I have a messy kitchen. You can choose to believe me or not, but the eyes. If you see it with your eyes, then you believe it. Why I say it with my mouth, I'm not sure. Why I'm inspired by Nechama's work as a Kala teacher is because she's very real, she's very relatable, she doesn't pretend to have it all together. I think that really informs the best work out there. They're not people that just seem to like not really get us. And also, when Nechama teaches her students, she's not just focused on halacha. She's very, very well-rounded. And you've heard me say this before, that I think this kind of content, whether it's sexuality, whether it's halacha, we have to round it out with a lot more. There has to be psychology, there has to be safety, there has to be communication. And Nechama's training, she doesn't just sit down with her kalas and teach them halacha. She really holds them in a very, very different way. And I'm really excited to have her here. Give me 1 second, Nechama, while I pin you. There we go. Awesome. All right, Nechama, why don't you just show up a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to go straight into the questions. How did that feel? I know you were nervous about coming on here. How did that feel to hear me say all of that?
I'm still a little nervous, but we'll get there. We'll get into it. It'll be good.
It'll be good.
Okay. So tell you a little bit about myself. I don't even know where to start. Like you said, I'm about a year younger than you, so 35 years old. I live in
You just gave away my age, Nechama. I did not announce I was 36.
I'm sorry.
You could have just been a year younger than me, and no one had to know.
Right.
Okay.
Oh shoot! You see, this is why you shouldn't do it live. Then we can edit.
We edited it out. Okay.
Okay. I live in Borough Park, and I'm the mother of Baruch Hashem 7 gorgeous, yummy, delicious kids who take every last bit of my energy and mind space. Whatever's left over with, I use in my coaching practice that I started not that long ago, actually with the help of Fally, who gave me the push to go ahead and do it, which is really, really exciting. Aside from that, I also, like she said, teach kalas and give refresher courses. I think that as much as that tells you a little bit about what I do with my time, it doesn't really tell you about who I am as a person. So if I could pick one thing that I would want people to know about me as a person, it's that meaning means a lot to me. So life is not always easy. I mean, my life in particular, I would say, let's say looking back at the last 7 to 10 years have definitely been a roller coaster in many different ways. And being able to make those experiences meaningful means a lot to me. I don't want to just live life. I want it to mean something. I want it to have given me something more than just survive. Like I made it through this experience or I made it through this episode. And I think that really directs a lot of my work, a lot of the trainings that I enjoyed, a lot of the modalities that I like is very much in that line. Like I don't just want to make it, I want to make it meaningful. And I always say, like, if I can look back at the end of it all and it mattered somehow, everything I went through, everything I did and everything I accomplished, I'll be happy. Like then it's good. So I think when it comes to Tara Mishpacha, also like we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's a big thing for me is that I want it to mean something. I want it to be meaningful.
Yeah, wow. As you're saying that, it's really clicking in my brain. Like, you're right. You're so right that it's for you, as long as I know you, it really has never been about skill.
Right.
It's about what meaning does this skill bring forth in my client's experience in their practice. Wow, I never would have thought to put it together that way, but that makes a lot of sense, and I very much resonate with that, because we've spoken about this before in some of the Q&As. I see this trend where people are, learning these 5-day trainings, right? And they do these crash courses where they pick up a skill in 5 days. And I don't know if you can pick up a skill in 5 days. Maybe you can experience a technique in 5 days. I don't think you become a skilled master in 5 days, but that's neither here nor there. But when you put it so eloquently, it's not about the skill. The skill is there to help you make meaning of something, because meaning is what you take with you. And I think that is something it's a certain level of mastery, right? Because meaning is very individualized. Me and you are two very different people, and we're not both going to find meaning in the same things and in the same way. So how do you find that comes across with your clients on a one-on-one basis, or even when you're doing a group lesson?
So for me, it's actually that's where it gets a little tricky for me as like what you would call a teacher or facilitator, where I have to be very aware that for me, what makes it meaningful is that I've grown somehow. I've worked on myself somehow. I've always like taken responsibility. Let's put it that way. Like I've taken responsibility in a situation and I've done something with it for myself on my own, in my own life, regardless of what the people around me are doing. And that's what I tend to bring into my classes, into my courses, and into my sessions, where I have to always be aware is that 1 second, but what's going to be meaningful to me might not be what's meaningful to them. So help them find their meaning and help them make it something that matters in their life, like help them find their next step. But I think that's really what it's all about. I very much believe that it actually used to bother me. Like people used to always say, well, no, it could take one person can make a marriage better. Like one person could be doing the work. And it always bugged me because it didn't make sense to me. But the truth of the matter is, I don't know if one person can make a marriage better, but you can make your experience in the marriage better. Like you can choose to use whatever situation you find yourself in and make it matter somehow, make it better somehow, work on like make it useful, I guess is the way to say it. Make it useful in a way that you can walk away with something from that challenge, from that experience. It doesn't also, not only in a bad way, like even when the good things are happening, make it meaningful, take something away from that.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing you say also, that you had to figure this out for yourself. Like when you were training, you chased after what was meaningful for you, and that comes across in the way you give your lectures and your content. And I think that's also very profound, because I remember I was engaged. I was engaged, so I was young, and I was reading John Gray's book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And I remember I was very young, right? When I got married, I was 17, and I was reading the introduction where he talks about the fact that he's on his second marriage. And I turned to my mother and I said, I don't understand. Why is he writing a book on relationships when he couldn't figure it out himself? I mean, he's on his second marriage. And, in a heartbeat, my mother just turned to me and said, well, how do you think he figured this out? He had to struggle. Like, who would you take advice from? People who just, they just they married their high school sweetheart, they figured it out, they're celebrating their 50th anniversary, or someone who really, stumbled and fell a couple of times. And I'm hearing that with you, the fact that you're finding meaning for yourself, and it comes across whether it's something that you're saying, like, oh, a little anecdote you're saying, or whatever you're quoting, or it's just the personality that you bring into the room. I think that's very
Yeah.
valuable, valuable and valid. All right, let's go into some more formal questions and we'll see where that takes us. So, my first question was, I've known you for a while, right? Even before you got into coaching. And
Yeah.
this is not your first career trajectory, right? When I met you, this is not what you were doing at all, right? So you were post high school, you decided to go into a career. What was that career?
So I actually, the truth is, the story starts that I really wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to go to nursing school before it was a thing to go to nursing school. But what ended up happening was I got engaged and we were going to live in Israel, and the schooling choices there just didn't include nursing. So I kind of had to change tracks. I decided to go into special ed instead. So I trained as a special ed teacher while I lived in Israel, came back. Once I lived here, I finished my degree here, just technicalities. I couldn't finish it up in Israel. And I did that for a nice amount of years. I worked in the special ed field, mostly actually in the boys' schools. I just landed there in the Chadarim and I loved it. It was so, it just, working with little boys is really yummy. They were amazing. And at some point, it just stopped feeling amazing. I think it was really, it all kind of happened at once. Me personally hit like a place where things were starting to shift, things were starting to change. I wasn't content. I was searching, I was looking. And at the same time, the work stopped feeling exciting. It stopped feeling exciting. And I continued it. I still did it for quite some time. I know you know that. We were talking about that a lot.
Yeah.
And then at some point, it just wasn't. I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I knew I couldn't continue. I had already started seeing people like on the side at that point, but then at some point I just made the decision. It's not. It doesn't make any sense. I'd rather stop that and devote my time to something that's filling me up with passion, that's filling me up with excitement. And I have, and it's been, I don't even know how long now, but I don't regret it for a second.
This is the thing that I always tell people who are looking to go into a career, like what it is that we do. And I always tell them, from the time that you train, from the time that you finish training, expect it to take 2 full years until this is your full-time job. There's a transition period. I remember you making it. I remember us talking about
Yes.
it, and I remember you still holding on to your special ed job probably for around 18 months to 2 years
Yep.
until you were confident enough and you were busy enough to do this full time. Yeah, I remember. So what's like, why this though? Why kala teaching? I remember like us having these, conversations about sexuality and intimacy, and we don't vent about our husbands in the gym ever, ever. We don't do that. Not even our kids either. But I remember like both of us ending up in the same kala teacher training. We were both highly pregnant. We had babies at like 2 weeks, 3 weeks apart.
Yeah.
So, but why? So why this? What made it? What clicked in your mind that this is it? It started out with a little bit of more like moving away from special ed into life coaching, but when did you know it was going to be this?
I knew it was going to be this before it was even close to being this. Basically, like, we were talking about before, right? Finding the meaning. So I didn't have an easy time. I had actually a really hard time adjusting to marriage, adjusting to intimacy. My husband and I couldn't seem to find our footing. And it was a long time before I found anyone to talk to, anyone who was offering any kind of information that actually helped or made sense or resonated. And when I did, it wasn't even like the best course that I took. Like it wasn't even the best class information that I got my hands on. But when I finally got something, like a little bit of something, and I felt that like first sigh of relief, I remember turning to my husband, and I'll never forget where I was. We were eating out, and I said, I think I'm going to become a college teacher. And he didn't even blink. He was like, okay, yes, I totally see that. And I was like, do you hear what I just told you? Like, I think I'm going to become a college teacher. And the reason for me was because I knew how hard it was for me, right? And I always considered myself to be an open-minded, out there, educated kind of a person. I didn't grow up in a I grew up in Queens. I was more, I don't know what you call it, exposed. And I had such a hard time finding the right resources, finding the right people. And I kept telling myself, if I had such a hard time, there must be plenty of other women out there who are also having a hard time. And if I can make it a little easier, like if I can be one more number that they have to call, amazing. So that's really when I made the decision to eventually, like, I had no clue where I was going to train, how I was going to get there, what it was like. It was just an idea that kind of like a seed that planted, and slowly, slowly over time, it just kind of it came about. And it actually, like, I really feel along the way, all the trainings, all the classes, even the college teacher training, it really fell in my lap at the right time. Like when I was ready for
Yeah,
it,
when
when I
we
was able
signed
to
up,
get
we
it
did
done.
not sign up together to the college teaching
No,
class. We both found
no,
ourselves on the same WhatsApp group at once, and we were like, "What? How did this
yeah.
happen?" Right? It fell into
Yes.
our laps independently,
Very,
like you
very
say.
much. Very. I found that across the board. Like when, like they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. I really found that to be true. At every point along the way, when I was ready for a particular training or the next step along the way, it was there. It was there. And so that's why because it means a lot to me. It's personal for me. I'm passionate about it. I want to be able to offer people a little bit of what I found helpful, that made a difference, that was useful.
Yeah, I am also reflecting just because I know you and I've watched you do this, and I would love for people to hear this. The along the way, looking back, is not that long. You know,
No.
when you're first starting out and you have this vision, like, oh, I'm going to be a college teacher. First off, I love that your husband said that to you, because isn't it nice when somebody who like is supposed to be the one who knows us best can just reflect that without blinking an eye? Um, I had that once years ago with my husband as well. I experienced something, and it was like a huge shift for me. It was a huge mind shift for me. And I remember feeling very hesitant, like even telling him about it, like I don't know what's happening and like why I'm thinking this way or what's happening to me. And he listened so quietly. I never had his attention like that. And at the end of it, I said, I think I'm going crazy. Like, what is this? And he's like, oh, I think this is just the beginning. I think that like this was always your calling. This was always going to be you. This is, and I was like, oh my gosh, for real, you know. And when he said it, I was like, well, why haven't you told me this all along? You mean you knew this about me all of this time and you haven't said? Yeah, but we're glad to get that validation when we do get it.
Yes, yes,
But like I said, it
for
wasn't
sure.
that long. It was, I mean, what was it from start to finish? What is this, 4 or 5 years? Well, it's
At
not start
most.
and it's not finish, right?
Right,
There's
right.
no
No, it
one
never really
point.
finishes.
Yeah, there was no really one point where it started. Like you said, it's everything that you've ever done in your entire life, right? You going
Mhm.
to college classes as a teenager basically sparked this. You not being able to go to nursing school sparked this. Your desire to, yes, be a nurse and assist people probably sparked this, right? There's no real one starting point, but if I had to just say as an outside observer who's been observing your like methodical training, we're talking what, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
about 4 or 5 years from when I first started actually like tangibly training and learning and all of that. Yeah, about 4 or 5 years.
And the reason I'm saying this out loud is like, I know that everybody wants to pump themselves up, like, oh, I have 10 plus years experience, 20 plus. I feel like it's really important for people to know when you decide that you're going to do something, it will take you 4 or 5 years. It will. It's like going to college, it's like going to high school. You have to be ready. When you decide you're going to be a college teacher, when you decide you're going to be a therapist, when you decide you're going to be anything, you got to give it at least that amount of time. But looking back, sitting here right now, it does not feel like that time has passed. And so much has happened in that time. Like we've had babies, you've had two
Babies.
babies. Yeah, you've had two. We've brought children into the world. We've discussed everything under the sun. We've met each
Exactly.
other in so many different spaces. It doesn't feel like so much time has passed. It literally feels like it's been happening yesterday.
It does. It does. Like sometimes I look back and I can't believe everything that happened in my life at the same time, that all of this was happening and how it all just came together. It's really
And you
unbelievable.
moved. You literally moved. You did
So much,
construction, you
so much.
moved. And I
Moved
feel like
out, moved in, like just it's been chaotic. Like I said, the last couple of years have just been chaotic. In a way, this was almost like my escape, like being able to go to my classes and my training because I love learning. So it was nice to be able to say goodbye. I'm shutting out now for an hour and a half. Gotta go learn. Gotta go train. But yeah, it has been. And but you know what? In a way, I'm so grateful to have done it now because, like I said, not only did it give me what I needed when I needed it in my own personal life, it just I don't know. Somehow the timing makes perfect sense.
yeah,
Somehow the timing makes
especially
perfect
as it
sense.
relates to what you had said, that it's your life experience. It's not the
Yeah,
content that you're learning, it's also the quality of what you are bringing in as a result of everything you've been through, right?
absolutely,
So,
absolutely. I mean, yeah, we'll get into the more specifics. I
yeah.
guess, in a little bit. But just Taras Mishpacha alone, like I don't mind saying, it never was a fun mitzvah for me. It really, it just wasn't. It wasn't something I would ever say I was
Hi.
excited about.
Yes.
And to be able to hear from the teacher that we had, and she would literally get on every week with like, she was just radiating joy. And I'm like, I hope I get to feel that way that one day. And I do, and I do. And to be able to say that is amazing. It's huge for
So to let everybody know, I'm very proud of who we trained by. We trained by Rachel Goldbaum, who was our Kala teacher. And one of the things, as you're talking about her radiant energy, one of the things that like stands out to me till today is she said, "The days of Kala teachers who don't wear makeup, like that is over." She says, "When your Kalas come to you, you wear eyeliner, you wear lipstick, you wear heels, and your shaitel." You know, she's like, "That is
totally.
we
I
are
thought
we
of
are
that as we
done."
were getting ready for today. I'm like, what am I going to put on? Well, Rachel's going to yell at me if I'm not like in a shaitel, in a full face of makeup. I'm dressed. I have my camera. You can't see it, but I'm totally dressed.
I get to be exempt
I'm
though.
doing her proud.
Yeah, I get to be exempt because I don't wear shaitel, and also I had this moment of like a tiny bit of panic because I do have like my more fancy like mitpachat and everything, and I really was Nechama. I was gonna put on the whole thing for
You were
this
going to do
thing,
it.
and I didn't remember that I had actually left like all of my stuff in New Jersey, where my brother's
Oh
getting married
gosh.
later this week, and I had brought everything over so that the day of the wedding I wouldn't have to think about it, and it totally skipped my mind that I might want to be dressed for this call. So here you go. So there's two kinds of Kala teachers in the world: Fally, who forgets to put on everything, and the Chama, who follows all the rules. But Nechama, I want to ask you, you're more than a Kala teacher. I mean, there's so much more that you do, right? You're a breathwork facilitator, hypnotherapist. We'll talk about that later. But in
Yeah.
terms of the Harasa Mishpacha, you also work with two different demographics. You work with
Yes.
Kalas and you work with marrieds, and you teach refresher courses. So can
Yeah.
you tell me a little bit about is there a difference for you as a teacher? What is the different framework? Like, what does a teaching of a Kala look like? Because I bet it's not the way we were taught, right?
No, 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 no. It's really not the way we were taught. And it's very, very different teaching kalas and teaching married women. So let me start with the kalas. The kalas, first of all, I do have actually less experience with, because when you're a new kala teacher, it takes time for people to hear about you, for people to trust you, for people to want to send to you. So I'm still kind of making my way into the teaching kalas. But what's very
When
different.
are you gonna finally say like, no, I have how many clients does it say like to be like, oh, I have
I
experience?
don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
what's the number of experience. I'm not sure. But the truth is that when it comes to Kalas, my main goal when it comes to Kalas is just to give them passion, to give them excitement and to give them passion. I mean, we all know, anyone here who's on this call that's married knows everything changes the second you're actually doing it. You're actually married, you're living with a guy, you're doing your bedikas, you're keeping the mitzvah. Like everything changes when it's real and you're actually doing it. Beforehand, as much as and again, I give them everything. We have like on an average about 10 to 11 classes. We cover everything. There's no such thing as a halacha class and hashkafa class. Everything is one picture. It's one big picture that I give them from A to Z. But mostly what I want them to remember is the excitement and the passion. Like what I remember about Rachel, I want them to remember about me. So the questions, the halachas, all that, we can clarify that after they're married. Like they can call me up. I have kalas that are constantly sending me questions and I'll answer them, and that's fine. But I want them to be excited. I want them to be excited to get married. I want them to be excited to keep Tarsa Mishpacha. I want mitzvahs aina to be exciting to them. Like that's my main goal with the kala. That's what I want to give her. I want to give her clarity and I want to give her excitement. But it just takes time. This is all brand new for them. They need the time to absorb it. They need the time to hear it. Like it takes, like I said, at least anywhere between 10 and 11 classes minimum
One on
to
one.
give a kala. Only one on one. I will only teach a kala one on one.
And how long is each class, would you say?
It can vary class to class. Like some classes just need more time than others, but I'd say on average, probably like an hour and a half a class.
That's a long time. That's like about 20 hours
Yeah,
roughly before the wedding.
yeah. We do because I mean, let's face it, today a college teacher is not just a college teacher. So a class will always start off with the checking in. How are you doing? How are the preparations going? That's usually when the college insecurities will come out, her questions, her nerves, her what's on her mind, like the silliest things, but to them it's the biggest thing, right? So we'll always start off by just chatting a little bit. And then we'll get into the actual learning. And you don't realize, like when you've been doing it and keeping it for so long, you don't think about half the things. Like one of the examples I give them before we ever get into a very technical class, right? For example, like before we get into the Harchakas class, I'll always tell them, if you had to explain Shabbos to somebody who's just starting to keep Shabbos it would be forget it. It would be like take you hours, like 39 malachas, explain to them each and every one, the intricacies, whatever. And let me ask, like, is it hard for you to keep Shabbos? Do you ever think about it? And she's like, no, like exactly. Right now, I have to give you all the information and all the details. It sounds impossible. It sounds like a ton. But when you're actually doing it and you're actually living it, it's not a big deal. But it does take time to go over everything, and not just to go over like we don't want our kalas to get the checklist version of Taras HaMishpacha. We want them to get the passionate version of Taras HaMishpacha, and that takes time.
I remember when we were in class and there was this one moment that we were going to be tested, remember?
Mm,
And that was right around the time I gave birth. I don't know if you had given birth yet. I think it was in the in-between window.
yeah.
And we were all feeling it like, oh no, what is this test going to be? And at that time, we were not quite finished training yet, but I had about 70 pages of notes, right, from the
Yeah.
beginning of the year till then. And I remember thinking like, okay, I'm going to read through this. And I was amazed at how I flew through 70 pages of notes because it was all obvious, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at the time I was thinking like, oh, well, this is amazing, because obviously we're either being taught it very, very well or because we're really, really living it. And the test was a breeze. We all did phenomenally on the test. But when you're saying this, I never really thought of it in that way. Yes, we're keeping Shabbos. So of course you're going to pass the test. It's stuff that you're doing all of the time. You've never had to think about it. And I remember being overwhelmed by 70 pages. And then this moment of like, but I'm actually keeping all 70 of those pages. I'm amazing.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yes.
teaching a kala that, and it wasn't 70 pages by the time we graduated. It was like 90 to 100 pages, at least for me.
Easily. Easily. Like
Yeah.
an entire notebook, just an entire notebook full, full, full of stuff.
Yeah, just so that you know, like where me and Nechama differ, she takes notes, and I type everything on the computer. So if
I am a notebook gal.
right, and mine is all on a Google document. So, if I ever needed to zip out to the bathroom for a second, and I asked Nechama to like give me the notes, she would send me a picture that I have to then type up. Whereas if she went to the bathroom, I would just highlight my text and WhatsApp it to her. So just saying, there's different kinds of college teachers out there, different kinds of note takers. Yeah, yeah. But I
Yeah.
want to I want to ask you a little bit more of a personal question, and you can answer this as personally as you want to, or as
Sure.
ballpark as you want to. What does a kala teacher who does that kind of work with a kala, what do they charge?
So I was actually shocked.
Okay.
I thought it was a lot less. When I started going out and actually starting to teach college, I asked my sisters who are actually marrying off their kids already, and some friends who just kind of would know, like in Bar Park, what are people charging? And they told me, well, they're charging anywhere between $1,800 and $2,000. And I was blown away. I was like, really? It's that much? I didn't think it was that much when I got married, but turns out it is. Today, it's like 2000 to 25 is what's considered a normal range. And at first it really bothered me because it seemed like a lot. But then when I stopped and thought about it, forget about the hours that I'm putting in. Okay, like I made the decision to do this. I'm passionate about it. I'm excited about it. I'm happy to give the hours. I'm also a terrible people pleaser. So I will always give more than I get, but that's fine. But at the end of the day, not to be like judgmental, but I am being judgmental. We live in a society where you're going to lay down $2,000 on a shaitel minimum or on a
Wait,
new
what?
outfit.
No, no, $2,000?
Yeah,
$2,000?
I know. I
No,
haven't bought a
honey,
shaitel
honey,
in a
honey,
really long
no, no,
time.
no, it's not. It hasn't been $2,000 in a long time.
Yeah, in a long time. So what I'm trying to say is like in the scheme of the expenses of a wedding, it doesn't actually seem that much different. And if you had to choose between this and some of the other things that you're doing to getting ready for a wedding, this is way more important.
It
This is way more
is.
important. And ultimately, at the end of the day, after the wedding, after everything is done, these kalas are coming back to me. I'm not charging them. I'm not, this isn't like a hour by hour session basis. They come back, they have a question, they need to talk about something. I'm there for them. So it kind of, I think about that also.
Yeah. And I need to put this here. There's a reason I asked this question. I think because I remember when I was a Kala and I did not get one-on-one Kala classes. We had 8 classes in a group. I think there were 18 to 20 girls in my group because I was getting married. I got married in October, right after Sukkot. It's like wedding season,
Mhm.
Everybody, it was like back-to-back weddings, and in those days there were a lot of groups. That's what it was done. And I remember my mother talking to my father about what college classes were costing. Okay, to be fair, this was 20 years ago and it was a group, but she had said $350. And I remember her like expression, like $350. And And of course, like in my mind, I wasn't the one marrying me off, right? I wasn't the one paying the bills. I didn't understand this. But literally, the minute I got married, and like you said, it doesn't work for everybody, and people struggle and they stumble and they need help. One session with a therapist is costing you that. And when we talk about the work that we do and we're so passionate about it, we're not just passionate about halacha, we're passionate about passion and developing that relationship with, for women, for these young kalas, and for them to feel like they have someone to turn to. And to me, that's priceless. I know what we're spending on our gowns, right? And
Exactly.
you wear your gown what? Once? Like once in your entire life. I remember coming home after my wedding and telling my husband it's not fair. Every little girl dreams of her wedding night in her white dress, right? And that's it. I got my white dress. I got the gown I wanted. And you wear it for what? It's like 6 hours, whatever. It was more like 12 hours. I'm like, that's it. That's it. It's like, that's it. It's never again. I'm never gonna. But like this, the Har Mashpacha, I think, in the excitement of putting together a wedding, this is like one of those things that you just have to do. It's not part of the excitement. It's not part of the fun. It's not as exciting as choosing a dress and dishes and what we call shtafir and finding, decorating the apartment. This is just like the thing that you have to do, that you
Yeah.
have to figure out a time and go to after work, and it's late night and you're tired. And it's like, but this is really the most priceless thing you're going to get, because it's the thing that 20 years in, it's the I did wear a hoodie to my wedding. Do not assume. Someone just puts on the chat privately to me, you mean you didn't wear a hoodie to the wedding? I did. I did. Assume nothing. Assume nothing. There are pictures of me in a hoodie at my wedding. And just so that you know, we have a family simcha coming up at the end of this week. My youngest sibling is getting married in Mirz Hashem, and there are wedding hoodies. There are wedding hoodies. We all have very beautiful, very expensive wedding gowns, and there are also wedding hoodies. It's not. I didn't make the hoodie stuff up. It's generational. I get it from my parents. But yeah, this is the 20 years after your marriage. No one remembers the food, the all the planning with the caterer. No one remembers what songs were played at your wedding. No, your gown you have long ago stopped fitting into. You know, but this is the one piece that actually stays with you forever, and we're just not treating it in that way. So I
And
want
I
to, yeah.
think, and I think the way that you get it, the way that you get it that first time plays such a huge role in everything that's going to happen after. Because I mean, we know that a lot of women didn't get it the way that we just got retaught, right? But at least if you get it in a beautiful way and you get it in a passionate way, even if things will be hard, but it's still beautiful. It's still beautiful. We have to help you maybe get there, but you're coming from a place where it's beautiful. For the women who were taught in a way where this feels like a burden, or it feels like a chore, or it feels like a checklist, and they're struggling, oy vey. Like it's that much worse. It's that much worse. And at the end of the day, like it also has to make sense. Like I said, I'm a mother of seven. My time is already limited. If I'm going to give more time, it has to make sense for me and for my husband. He has to give up all that time.
So talk to me now about the married women that you teach, because it's my understanding that not only do you give refresher classes, but I see refresher classes. There's always a time of year where women are advertising refresher classes. It usually happens after Pesach. The days are longer. Summertime in the bungalow colony is a great time. But most refresher classes that I see are like, one or two classes. And my understanding is that that's not what you do. You teach an entire refresher course. So tell me a little bit more about what your structure is, why that's your structure, and about the women and what they're
Sure.
getting out of it.
Sure. So actually, the married women is what puts the smile on my face. It's what gets me excited. And it's one of the things I always saw myself doing more than teaching kalas. I always said, like, if the kalas come, I'll take them on, but the women are the ones that I want to talk to. Because again, that's my experience. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to come from a place where Tarsa Mishpacha feels like a chore or like a burden or something that you just have to put up with and deal with, versus what it is for me now, which is the most beautiful part of my life and my marriage. And I want to be able to give that to them. My course, it's interesting actually how it came together, because I was actually teaching about marriage and about intimacy before I gave my refresher class. And when we finished our training and I was talking to some people, some ladies, one of them was actually my cousin. She's like, Nechama, do it. Like, just jump into it. Give a refresher class. Like, we want to hear what you have to say. And I did it. I literally bit the bullet. We finished training, I think, around Pesach time, and then Shavuos. right after Pesach, I gave my first refresher. And when I sat down to put the classes together, I knew straight off the bat I wasn't just going to review halacha. There was so much else that I felt was meaningful, like I said, that I found helpful. And it wasn't only Taras HaMishpacha, like to review it and relearn it. So I knew I wanted to bring more to the course. And when I sat down to try to figure out, okay, well, I know, let's say I want to teach this and this concept. Where am I going to put it in? Like, how am I going to find a place within Taras HaMishpacha to put it in? What amazed me was how seamlessly every single concept that I felt helpful in my life that I wanted to share with women, it just was right there. It was right there in
In the
Taras
subject
HaMishpacha.
of, wow.
It was right there in the frame, like, and so what ended up happening was the Taras HaMishpacha, literally, that was the framework. That's where everything fit in so seamlessly. And
So you're talking
ultimately,
psychologically, in terms of
psychologically, there were
communication,
so many, yeah, like one
medically.
example, let's say from Ignite, was the seasons and cycles. Module 3 was massive for me. It was massive for me. It led to so much change in my life. And I knew that that was a concept I was going to include. And then it just, of course, it makes so much sense. Like Taras Mishpacha is a cycle. You have to go through the different phases. You have to go through all the steps to go from Nida to being Tahora. Like, it's just every concept, every idea that I wanted to include was right there. And that's when I realized that if we just open our eyes, I was keeping Taras Mishpacha all these years. Like, I could have benefited from all these concepts and all these ideas all these years. There was just no one to point it out. And that was my goal. I wanted to be there to point them out. And also, like I said, to include a lot of the things that I found helpful, and be able to give them to other people. So it's not just about the let's review the halachas and make sure you're doing things right, which is like those 1 or 2 classes, or again, maybe they're picking and choosing one area that they're going to focus on and reteach it in a nicer way. For me, I want to give you the full package. I want you to walk away feeling like this mitzvah is the biggest gift that you have. And so that takes time. So ultimately, the way the course ended up coming together was it's 7 classes now, 7 full classes where we really go through the whole mitzvah, the mitzvah of Taras HaMishpacha and every single part of it. But every single part of it has so much to offer, so much wisdom, so much beauty, so much information. And that's what we do. I also made it very practical. I mean, there are some women here, I think, who have taken it with me. Every week there's a practical exercise because I appreciated that when I took classes and I took courses and there was something I can do with the information afterwards. It sat differently. I took it home with me differently. So every week there's a practical exercise. Even the timing, the
I
timing.
was going to ask you about the
Yes.
timing, right? Because last year you did it between Purim, between Pesach and Shavuos. There was
Yes.
something about that, right? About the Sfiras Haimer?
It's magical with the Sfir Sa'imer. And actually, I made a review sheet for each week, and there was a section on the review sheet, like this week's Sfira, and how it tied in so beautifully with everything we were talking about. I really feel like this is just Hashem guiding the way and making everything fall out the way it was. I actually tried getting the refresher this year in the winter, and it wasn't coming
I
together.
remember.
It just wasn't happening. I said, you know what?
To
It's
be
not
fair, you had a
happening.
baby 5 minutes ago. You were going to
I
give it.
did. I did. Yes, I know. I did. I had a baby, like she said, 5 minutes ago, and I was like, sure, I'm going to do a refresher. Why not? I'll be so great, in the new house that's not finished that we just moved into and everything is in boxes. Why not? So yeah, thankfully that did not come together. That probably saved my sanity. But Svira time is just, first of all, there's the practical aspect of it. People don't have weddings. People are less busy. It's easier for them to join a course week after week. But the magic of every single.
Wait. I never thought about that. Wait, so there's a reason why, wow. I've been doing it all wrong. I've been doing my courses in the winter. I,
Mm-hmm.
and you mean there was a better time of year that was there all along and I just never thought of it? Wow. I'm gonna have to rethink my whole life now.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. It worked out well, and I think that's just the time it has to be. It works so well with the Sphira. It works so well with the magic of those days. It's
I'm also
perfect.
reflecting that your course is 7 weeks.
Yes.
Mine is 6.
Yeah.
And which is crazy because Ignite is so jam-packed. You were there the first cohort. It was initially 5 weeks, and then
Yes.
a year later we just extended it to a sixth week. And the way we run Ignite, there's an off week. We do extra Q&As. We're doing bonus calls. But the fact is, I've squished all of this content into 6 modules, and you are going back to let's call it the basics halacha, just basics, and you're in 7 modules. And I think
Yeah.
this really is important for women to understand that to relearn, this is not just a refresher course. This is a refresher immersion. This is a workshop. This is a whole new mindset. It's a way of just reframing your whole experience with this. And I'm wondering, because you say that teaching women is really where you're lighting up, and you're committed to just reawakening that passion and that excitement and that love for this particular mitzvah. And I know a lot of women struggle. A lot of women struggle, especially. And I think one of the things that I got personally out of training, right, was that for the first time I realized this mitzvah is about me. This is not about my husband. I mean, of course, I want him involved, but like just falling in love with the practice of it for myself was such a gift that it was me
It's
having this
ownership.
like,
It's
yeah,
ownership. We walked away with an ownership feeling, like this is my mitzvah to keep. That, I
yeah.
mean, that's I know what it's like for me, and I think that's what I'm hearing from you also. It's
So I want to
the
know,
ownership.
the women that you're working with, what do you feel their biggest struggle is? And I know that there are many, right? But like, what do you feel the biggest frustration? Also, I feel like a lot of women, they hear a refresher course and they're just like, blah, like I'm not gonna do this.
Yeah.
I'm not committing to halacha. So like, what is different, and what is the biggest problem that, I mean, I think we know what's different about yours, but what is the biggest blah that women are coming in with? I also like, what's, I think, the biggest piece of misinformation that you keep stumbling across?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, the biggest piece of misinformation I think is easy. Probably most common is chafifa. When it comes to preparing for the mikvah, I think that's where the most misinformation,
You're gonna have to
misunderstandings
define
come into
chafifa,
play.
because a lot of people
Chafifa means
this
the
far in, they don't
preparation.
even know what it is.
Yeah, preparation for mikvah, getting ready to go to the mikvah, that like time that you're cleaning yourself, you're washing yourself, all of that. There's a lot of myths that have been debunked. There's actually, I don't recall, Fally, maybe you remember the name of who wrote up. There's actually a paper written up, like debunking the myths of preparation for
Yeah,
mikvah.
I don't remember. She
Yeah.
wasn't from our class, but she had taken a
Yeah,
prior
someone had
class.
posted
Yeah.
it on the group. So I think that's probably where the most information comes in. People either heard something, misconstrued what they heard, think they learned it a certain way from their college teacher, but completely misunderstood what the lady was saying. Just a lot of misinformation when it comes to getting ready. And I'll be honest, like when you say what's the most bleh, I think that's one of the hardest things for women is that they cannot stand it. It either fills them with a lot of anxiety, like they're doing it wrong, they're not getting it right, and they're going to be toivel and it's not going to be kosher, and what's going to be then? Like they're really anxious about that. They're driving themselves crazy about that. I mean, the stories I could tell you where the bleach pens come out. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. It's just it's yeah, it's no, it's that's I think one area where a lot of women
I just
struggle.
looked it up though. I looked up the debunk the dunk. Debunk
Debunk
the
the
dunk.
dunk.
It was
Yes, yes.
Chai Chin from
Dietitian. Oh, she's
Maryland, from
amazing.
Baltimore. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
I was like, I have
So,
to look up that document. Chai Chin. Everyone should look her up as well. She's from Baltimore and she's
yes,
phenomenal.
she's fabulous. So she wrote Debunk the Dunk, and there's just a lot of that kind of information there where it's actually not as crazy as you think it is. It's not as complicated as you think it is. I think one of the best lines that I heard from somebody on our college teacher chat was that on an average day today, we are probably 1,000 times cleaner than women 200 years ago were after they did their preparation for mikvah. So everyone take a deep breath. Like it's okay.
It
um,
is.
it really like let's just put things into perspective and let's bring it back to the magic of what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I think getting ready for mikvah is a big one where women just their blood like they're just not interested. It becomes a chore. It becomes a pressure. They're not excited about it. They're not excited about going to mikvah. They're just really, really not. And I think another area where a lot of women struggle is when it comes to our chakos. They either find it really hard to keep. It seems pointless. It doesn't feel meaningful. I think probably one of the comments I hear so many people say, like, seriously, like we're going to pass the ketchup bottle and jump into bed together. Like, come on. That's the theme. That's the feeling that people have towards it. They don't have the like an appreciation for it. But if I'm being honest, I think the root of it all, like if I had to like go deeper and say, well, where is all this stemming from? It's really women don't feel like they own this mitzvah. They don't feel like they are carrying. It feels like a burden that they're carrying rather than a treasure that they're holding and keeping safe. And we learned, a lot of what our training was about was hearing about how the women of a time actually added on more to make this mitzvah more special and to keep it more beautifully. And when I learned that, it blew me away. It actually brought tears to my eyes. I was like, there was a time where women like were trying to take on more and make this more special. Like today we're doing the opposite. So I think that's where we have to get back to. We have to get back to a place where women feel like this mitzvah is a treasure rather than a burden. And when that happens, I think everything else kind of sorts itself out.
Yeah, I am laughing that you just mentioned this. This is in Sefer HaChinuch, right?
Yeah.
So for women who don't know this, that in biblical times they did not have to do 5 plus 7. Okay, they toiveled 7 days after they saw blood. They didn't even have to do 7 clean days originally. It was just 7 days. So
Clear
right,
days.
clear, right? Not clean. We don't use the word clean because you're not dirty. Okay, clear days with the emissions, because women will always be emitting something, right? You can be emitting any sort of vaginal discharge, but it doesn't fall into the category of nida. So after 7 days after the bleeding began, there was toiveling. But then there are different laws for different kinds of emissions. And they basically fall into two main categories. One is called zava and one is called nida. And they have two very different halachos, and there's also different kinds of zava. There's a zava that comes for one day, there's a zava that is a 2-day zava, and then there's a 3-day zava. And Nechama, do you know why I know this so well today? It's not because I have a photographic memory, although I'm that smart. It's not because of that. It's because I decided that my life is not busy enough. It's just not at all. And I decided that for this month, I was going to do a 31-day challenge to learn Masechet Megillah, because we have been discussing that we're bored and we should probably start learning Gemara a little bit. So I had an opportunity to do 31 days of Masechet Megillah and do a siyum right before Purim, and it's going to be amazing. And today I did the daf. And the lecturer says, okay, everybody, I just want to know, I want you to know we're covering some like really weird ground today. And if you don't get it, it's fine. And then she like dives into Zava, and I'm like, I get it. I've learned it already before. I felt so good about myself. And I was like, oh, this is the hard stuff. We know this. But what people don't know is that in the biblical times, it was very simple. They were not, today we're like, oh, we're only tahor and we're only permitted, basically 2 weeks a month if you have an average cycle. In those times, they were permitted 3 weeks a month. Right? Because all they had to do was wait 7 days. It was very different. And what happened was that towards the end of the Beis Hamikdash, second Beis Hamikdash, women were realizing that the knowledge was getting lost between Zava, between Nida, the different kinds of Zava, and they were very concerned because they felt very strongly that they wanted to keep this mitzvah very precious. And they sat down and they made really tough mathematical equations because it's not so simple. Like Zava has one kind of rule, Zava has a different kind of rule. And they made certain mathematical equations that came out to the understanding that if they waited 5 days plus 7 days, when they are going to the mikvah, they will have encompassed both Zava and Nida, and they will never have to worry about whether they were trespassing or being over on any of those. And the only reason why the Rabbanim of that generation allowed it, because the Torah says you are not allowed to take away or to add to any mitzvah. It is not a mitzvah to do chumras, especially in this subject. This is one of the areas where the rabbis want us to be as makil as possible. They want to offer us as many opportunities for intimacy and togetherness as possible. So why would they then add on 5 plus 7? And by the way, bedikas, no, they didn't do bedikas in those days. They didn't need to do bedikas in those days because it wasn't about Zava. The bedikas are completely separate, okay? The bedikas have nothing to do with Nida. They have more to do with Zava because they did have to be completely clear, because Zava had to do with the discharge that could have been like a sexually transmitted disease. So it was what we're practicing today is nothing like the way they were practicing back then. The only reason that the rabbis allowed to do something so drastic was because the women wanted this. The women were so in love with this mitzvah, they found it so precious. They found it was not the rabbis who put this on the women, it was the women who asked the rabbis to to institute it, and it was a majority of the women. And I think that's what you're
Yeah.
saying, is that this has been lost. Women being so passionate about this, and it wasn't from a place of chumrah, it was from a place of, we want to do this right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and so talking about women being very, because I think this is really important also, that we're not allowed to add. I think this is where this is one of the misconceptions that come up a lot, like the OCD mikveh stereotype, right? Um,
Yeah.
and then the panic when a woman goes to a Rav and he gives her like this answer, like somebody was told, she's allowed to toivel, and so she sent me a private message. She's like, I was allowed to toivel second day Yom Tif, and like there was no preps, like I couldn't do anything, and the rabbis are like, they're so lenient, many of them, when you talk to them and you worry about like, oh my God, am I doing this wrong? And it's like, I think we just have to come down to what this really is, and it's really just a way of life. This is not OCD. This is just, if you're living your life the way you are, you're already clean. You're like, you don't have
Yeah.
nits, like you don't have a lot of the things that you're
Exactly.
worried about, they're not necessary.
Exactly.
And when
Exactly.
you
I mean,
add,
I'm
yeah,
laughing because what's coming to mind is when we were training in our cohort, one of the things that everyone was getting all excited about was the hairs on the back, like the mikvah attendant picking the hairs off the back. And everyone was like, and I remember when Rachel was like, what with the hairs on the back? You're going into the water. It's coming off your body anyway. Like, stop with the hairs on the back, you
right,
know?
right,
So
and
it was very refreshing to have that like ease, just ease. Like, this is easy. This is not hard. This is not
yeah,
complicated. Think of that time that you finished, doing a mat cleaning on your house and you wanted to go and get like a really good shower and just feel yummy and fresh afterwards. That's what you're going for. You're going for
right.
that good cleaning. I want to be fresh and clean.
Exactly. That's what it is. I want to be fresh and clean. It's not scrub your skin off until you're raw and bleeding. And I think
Exactly.
this is also the piece. You are not allowed to add. You are not allowed to make this more chumradig. That is not okay. Torah does not want this. And I love that the word you used, ease. It should be easy. It should be
Ease.
easy.
I think that's probably the most common feedback that I get, and the nicest feedback that I get from women afterwards is like, oh my gosh, my last experience was unlike anything I've ever had before. It was so calm, it was so beautiful. Like, even my husband noticed that it was different. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I
That's
don't know
what we
why.
want.
As you're talking, I'm having this moment, like this flashback of, when I was in college classes, and it was that, it was that night, it was that lesson, the one they taught you about the night. And
Mhm.
I'll never forget how my college teacher taught it. She had a ruler, those bendy rulers that had, the arms, right? Right, right. So she had a
Mhm.
bendy ruler, and then she had a tube of
Gosh.
toothpaste. There was a tube of toothpaste that was, empty. It was already empty. So the bottom was folded. So it looked like folded knees. And she laid the tube of toothpaste over the bendy ruler. And the bendy ruler had arms out and legs out, like splayed onto the desk. And the toothpaste was,
Oh my goodness.
gyrating on top of this bendy thing. And I just need to know, Nechama, how do you how do you address
Do you
this
want me
with
to
your
show you? Do you
callus?
want me to get my tub of toothpaste now?
Do you have toothpaste?
There's no tub of toothpaste. No, it's first of all, one thing I will say is, in the summer there was like a summit, and there were a lot of people talking on different facets of intimacy, and one of them was a college teacher from Australia, and she just put into words what we had already learned in our training. Like, where a Akala came to her was towards the end of their classes, and she's like, my friend told me there's like a big secret that you have to tell me. Like, are we going to learn the secret today? And she's like, no, I already told you everything you need to know. Like, you're good. I think it's that, like, there's no big secret. There's no build up to anything. We're talking about the logistics of sex from day one, because it has to be relevant. Like, how can you talk about Taras Mishpacha without knowing what the context is? Like, it has to make sense. It has to fit into a bigger picture. Otherwise, what are you learning? But when it comes to the actual technical, like, let's call it the technical how-to lesson, it's just really joyful. It's a lot of it. It's a lot of information because it's new and it's the unknown, but it's very practical. I was gonna say hands-on, but that doesn't seem
That
like the
doesn't
right
sound
choice of
right.
words
No.
for this kind of class. No, not hands-on. But very clear, nothing left to mystery, nothing left to the imagination. Um, Yeah, just really, really open, honest, factual. No dolls, no toothpaste bottles, none of that. Just woman to woman. Let's talk real, and give you what you need.
I actually like what you just said, woman to woman. I think people don't appreciate that Kalas are women. We treat them very much like young girls, and we're getting them ready for womanhood, right? We're shoving them into this like married life. And I think for a lot of us, the experience either that we've had or that we see young girls having are like we're playing house.
Yeah,
And there is a playing house aspect. I mean, a lot of couples are not financially independent. They're still on mommy and tati's dime. They're eating dinner by mommy and like they're doing that, and it's not a bad thing. But this piece that where do these young kids get to feel like, no, I'm a woman. This is a piece. I'm a woman. This
yeah,
is a sacred
absolutely.
contract.
Absolutely. It's actually one of the things I usually will say to them, like on our first class, is like, welcome, like you're joining the club. You're part of us now.
You
You've
can sit
made
with
it.
us in the bungalow colony.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think very, very much. And the truth of the matter is, I know if I'm going to say this, it might put me out of business down the line, but I hope it does because I don't want to have to be like I want women to be college teachers for their daughters. Maybe they'll go to somebody else and have someone outside of their family that they can talk to about a challenge. I get that. You don't want to go to your mother to talk about everything. Okay, I can hear it. But I want you to teach your daughters, like get excited. I want you to feel so passionate about this mitzvah that when it's your daughter's turn to get to keep it, don't you want to be the one to tell her? Like, how could that not be the case? It's so beautiful. It's so amazing. Like, this has been passed on for generations since Sarah Imenu. And you're gonna like let someone else do the job for you. So I hope I don't have to be in this business, like in this line of work down the line. I want it to be a sisterhood. I want it to be a group of women, like, oh yes, my daughter is ready, and we're gonna welcome her to the fold, and we're gonna tell her everything she needs to know, and we can support each other in doing that. Like that's what I want to create. But really, really, like I think when we give women the comfort around this mitzvah, then it stops to seem so crazy to be able to talk to their own daughters about it.
Why do you think that women are not talking to their daughters about it? I mean, you know
Um,
that I share the same sentiment. I've said this before as well. So why do you think, though, that this hasn't happened yet?
there's a lot of reasons. I think women don't feel confident enough. I don't think that they feel like they know it well enough to be able to give over to their daughters. They're worried maybe they won't give it over right. There's a lot of embarrassment. They don't feel like it's appropriate for them to give it over to their daughters. When you think about that, that's laughable. Appropriate. This is like the epitome of chinuch. I remember. I'll never forget. I don't know why my friends and I were having such a morbid conversation, but I remember
You don't
talking.
know why.
I don't know why, but
Nechama,
I
I feel like
remember
this happens
telling.
to you a lot. Morbid conversations are not new to you.
No, they're really, really not. But we actually a friend that we have in common, and I remember telling her
Oh,
like,
it's a
if there's
friend that
a,
we have in common.
it's a
This
friend that we
surprises
have
me
in
not at
common.
all. I feel like a lot of our
Okay.
friends are into morbid conversations.
And I remember telling her like, if there's a Holocaust today, if the world ends today, and my daughter survives and I don't, have I given her everything that she needs to survive as a Jewish woman? Like, have I given her the chinuch that I need to give her as a mother? And and that really stopped like it made me stop and think because what are we afraid of, like what are we talking about telling our daughters a mitzvah that they're going to get to, that we want them to keep, like why
Right.
not, it should be the most natural thing.
So you know that I'm in full agreement with you, right? But I think that like for most women hearing this, there's like there's mixed experience where one people are like, yeah, you're right. Like that's exactly what I want. And then on the very flip side, and maybe for some people it's at the very same time is like, I don't even know where to start. Like that's very
Yeah,
overwhelming,
yeah,
right?
it's very overwhelming, and even for the ones who are on board and would like to see it, they just don't see how
Right.
realistically it can happen. And I think the way it happens is that you take a really good refresher.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think the way
Yeah.
it happens is that you get really passionate and comfortable with this mitzvah. You learn, you feel like you own it, feel like this mitzvah is your treasure. And don't wait for, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, like, don't wait for the last minute to spring this on your daughter. This can be just like, maturing, just like sexuality is an ongoing conversation that happens in bits and pieces from baby steps all the way till when they get the bigger picture. I think this can be similar. There's so much, like before work, there's so much foundational work that can groundwork that can be put in before they're engaged, before you have to dump all of this information on them, where it shouldn't have to feel like a dump. It should feel
Right.
like, oh, let's tell you all the details now, but not like, oh, here you go. More, 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 more.
Right.
Okay, now keep it. Don't get it wrong. You
Right.
know? I think that's how you do it first. You get comfortable. Like honestly, like with everything, with sexuality, it's the same way. You have to first feel very comfortable with what you want to say, and then the saying it just kind of comes naturally.
I was going to ask you if there's one tool or piece of information that you wish everyone knew, what would it be? But I feel like that's kind of it, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's really like feel like this mitzvah is yours. Just that ownership piece. I can't stress it enough. This is your opportunity. Like this is something that only women can keep. I always laugh. The women that the mitzvahs that we feel so special about, Hadlakas Neiros and Freshas Challah, like we feel so special and we're crying and we're saying our tchinis and we're davening and we're pouring our hearts out. And yet men can do those too. But you know what they can't do? They can't go to the mikvah. They can't keep
right,
Taras HaMishpacha. Like this is our special gem. And
right.
yet when it comes to this one, there's so much resistance and there's so
And the
much
one night a year that a man has to do a bedika, everybody knows all about it, right? Bedikas chametz. We joke that when the man has to do a bedika, the whole world shuts down till the man doesn't do his bedika. Dudes, like we got. But I wish,
so
right? I wish women felt as excited and as like busy with their bedikas that is actually their
as they
mitzvah as they do the one night of a year. Like I always say that if men had periods, I
right.
mean, we would live in a very different world. There would be like free period product everywhere because if men had to deal with it, it would be free. It would be free. Men would brag about it, like who bleeds harder, who bleeds faster, who bleeds longer, whose blood is redder, right? Because men would do
Yes.
that. And the
Yes.
minute it's women, we've lost the like. Do you know how beautiful this is? Do you know how precious this is?
It really, really is. It really, really is. And I'll just add on one thing here is that what I love about, I mean, there's a lot of things I love. I think that's pretty clear by now. But one of the things I love is that this mitzvah can be special, even if what you're coming home to after mikvah isn't ideal, and isn't so special and isn't so beautiful yet, hopefully. Mikvah can still be beautiful. Like that experience doesn't have to be taken away from you just because marriage is hard or just because sex is hard right now. Like that can still be something that you get to keep and can still be meaningful and can still be special. And that's another thing that I want to give. I want to give that back to women, that it's not only about your relationship being in a great place. This is just a mitzvah that you get to keep. And it's just as much about you and Hashem as it is about you and your husband.
And you and yourself.
And you and yourself. I say,
Yeah.
yeah, we talk about this in
Yeah.
the class. Like it really is that trajectory. It's first you and yourself, then it's you and Hashem, and then it's you and your husband.
All right, I have one more question for you because I know that
Okay.
there are people on the chats who have questions, and I want to keep this call to time because we're mothers.
Yeah.
Actually, there are two more questions, but the
Okay.
last question was going to be to tell us a little bit more about the other work you do. But I think we'll save it. I think people who want to find you
Sequel.
in terms of breath work, hypnosis. There's a sequel, yes, they can find you. But the last question I really wanted to ask you, I think this is important for all of the women listening, is when women feel sad about their missed years when they didn't have this info. So many of us got married and we really struggled, and some of us struggled for 5 years, for 10 years, and some of us struggled for 20 years. What do you tell these women about all of that missed opportunity or missed time?
I'll tell you what I'll tell them, and then I wanted to share with you an amazing story because it kind of speaks to this point, this idea. What I say to them, or what I would say to them is, okay, but now it can be. Like you have so many years ahead of you, so make it meaningful now. It like this is what I've done. Take all those years that it wasn't meaningful. It makes it that much more special now that it is. True, you didn't have it for those years before, but that just makes you appreciate what you can have now going forward. Like focus on that. Make that make that your driving force. Like it wasn't there till now, but it's going to be there now in a big way. Make the most of that. Make the most of that and use that to help other people, whether it's, go out there and become a college teacher yourself. I know that we need more of us. Or like I said, whether it's just, in your own family, talking to your own children, even if you're not going to teach your daughter the halachos, but just bring the passion. She'll get it. She'll see the excitement. She'll know. She'll look back and recognize and realize all the ways that this was a mitzvah that you kept. So if it wasn't special till now, I'm sorry, and that sucks. I know I'm coming from that place also, but it can be special now. And when that switch happens and it starts to become special, it just it changes everything. It changes everything. It changes the way you think about it. It changes the way you feel about it. It changes the way you experience it. And then that just exponentially impacts your life in so many beautiful ways. And I'm going to share the story that I actually got permission to share because it is a personal one.
Is this the one that you had texted me last night that you wanted
This
to
is
share
the one I
yet?
was going to
Okay,
text
I've
you
been waiting
about.
for
And
this one.
I literally, I get goosebumps when I share it because when I think about it, even because this isn't like we're not talking about some holy tzaddik thousands or hundreds of years ago. This literally happened now with a woman, regular woman, like all of us here on this call. She had taken my refresher course last Sfira, and she had reached out afterwards, like many women do. Thank you so much. It's so special. And my last mikveh experience was so much different than all my other ones. Usually it's very stressful and it's very difficult. And even just keeping Taras HaMishpacha, there were parts of it that were really hard for me. But my husband and I decided that this cycle, we're going to be extra careful. And mikveh was so much more intentional and so much more beautiful. And she shared that she had had a couple of miscarriages beforehand, probably like four, I think she said, four miscarriages before this. And this, after this mikvah, she got pregnant. And time was passing and she was still pregnant and it was holding and it was lasting. And she reached out to me kind of at that point where like you stop holding your breath and you're like, okay, this is it. It's happening. And she was just so excited and she was overflowing and she was so thankful. And great, beautiful, mazel tov. Like that in and of itself is already a beautiful story. Like, wow. But it doesn't stop there. She went for her 20-week scan and they found a defect with the baby. They found signs of spina bifida. And there was a lot of concern. The doctors were not sure about how severe or how difficult it was, but as time went on and she went for second opinions, because you can't always believe the first scare. Doctors will scare you about anything these days. It came clear that there was some kind of issue, and it seemed pretty severe. It seemed like it was open. It seemed like there were exposed nerves. It wasn't looking good. The prognosis for her baby was basically paralysis from the waist down. This was a child that was never going to be able to crawl or walk, or get out of Pampers. And I mean, she was devastated. She had been waiting for this for literally for years. Her husband and her had been trying to have another kid. And this was a woman who didn't have an easy life. Like this was just another, it felt like another roadblock, another stumble. And she reached out. She was having a very hard time with it. And I tried to give her a little bit of chizuk. And I said, look, you went into this with Taras HaMishpacha. Like you kept this mitzvah beautifully. It's going to keep you. It's going to keep you. Whatever that means. Like we never know what life is going to look like, and we can't always see the good, but I just know it's like there will be good. It can't be that from going to a mikvah so beautifully you're going to come out with just pain and bad. It just doesn't make any sense. And so, okay, the pregnancy is progressing and things are looking bleaker. This is becoming a very complicated case. The doctors are stumped. They have no clue. Like this becomes one of those cases that everyone wants to get in on because like it becomes a science learning experience for them. I remember we were talking and she shared that like there was a I'm trying to remember what it was, but basically they were anticipating the need for a hysterectomy at the time of the birth. And she was really sad about that. She's like, I finally got back in touch with Taras HaMishpacha. Like how can that just happen? It doesn't make any sense. And we were preparing her because look, not always is life going to end in roses and sunshine. Like sometimes it is going to be challenging and hard. Okay, so to make a long story short, she is due to give birth, and the day comes, and she knew she was having a C-section. This was going to be a complicated birth. All the teams are on standby. There's surgeons. There's like a room full of medical staff ready, and the baby is born, and the baby is moving its legs, and the baby is Baruch Hashem fine. Needed surgery, definitely needed surgery to fix whatever needed to be fixed. But the baby came home from the hospital in record time. Even the doctors were amazed. The doctor basically shared with her, he's like, look, God did the job for me. There was nothing I could have done here. He took care of you. Like your son is fine. He's going to have a beautiful, healthy life. The bris was last week Friday. They were able to make a bris for him. And I remember I was just crying when she told me because this isn't, like I said, this isn't somebody from years ago or this big tzaddik, this is a regular woman who struggles, who has hard days, who has good days, and who just tried a little bit harder to keep Taras HaMishpacha with a little bit more intention and a little bit more beauty. And then she just saw this open miracle happen. How could you not get inspired from that? It's just like when we say mikvah has the power to transform, it literally has the power to transform. You're talking about she shared with me some more details, some of the miracles. I don't want to get into like nitty gritty details, but just unbelievable, unbelievable stuff. How every step along the way, the doctors were expecting the worst, and then what they thought was the worst thing actually turned out to be the best thing for this child. It was just open miracles, and I have no doubt that her belief in mikvah and her experience with mikvah had a huge part in the miracles that she saw.
I think when I'm hearing this is an incredible story, but what's coming up for me is that I was actually really surprised and amazed at how many women I've spoken to in recent weeks and months that did not know that mikvah was a time that you can daven, like in the mikvah, that they
Yes,
can
I
ask the
know.
mikvah lady for more time. And actually, the mikvah lady is obligated to give it to you, for
Yes.
more time to just stay there and daven. And one of my friends just texted me recently. She says, I never had a mikvah like that. I sent the lady out after I finished toveling. I sat on the steps in the mikvah and I just prayed. I've never done that. And like the imagery, like I've prayed in the mikvah before, but I've never thought of sitting on the steps like that.
Yes,
She
I'm
just
thinking
casually,
the same thing.
right? Like
That's
she was just
brilliant.
casually, like on the side of the pool, she was sitting on the steps. I was like, wow, Anyway, we have a couple minutes left. I want to go through the Zoom chat, just some quick things that came in, see how many
Okay.
we get to, because I do want to keep to time, but I think,
Okay.
you know, what you're talking about brings up a lot for women. And I just want to also, before we go to the questions, I just want to ask where women can find you. If they want to reach out to you, do you have a website? Do you have an email address? How can they
I
find
don't
you?
have, right. So I don't have a website actually. The best
Yet.
way yet, yes, I
Yes,
don't have a
yet.
website yet. So I guess how could they get in touch with me?
I
Well,
can always put your email address, however you want to be reached. I can
I was
always
gonna
put it in
say
okay.
the best way is via email, and we can put that information on the group.
Yeah. Okay.
The best way would be via email, or via text messaging or WhatsApp. That would be
Okay.
fine too. And then when it comes to the course, like I said, I don't know yet exactly when I'm opening registration, but in Meretz Hashem, I really do hope to do it again this year after Pesach. So I made a wait list for that. Anyone who would be interested in joining up potentially for then, and wants me to let them know when I'm opening registration, then they could just sign up for that wait list, and
So I can link the wait list as well.
you can link
That's
the wait list as
fantastic.
well. And that way
Okay.
I'll have their information, and they can sign up if they would like to when the
Sounds
time comes.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go quickly through the Zoom chat. Someone asked, how do you juggle being a mother of seven, Kaneda, with giving your callas that much time and hours?
Who said I do?
Hey, I was going to ask you also, like, how many callas can you realistically take on at one time?
Realistically, because I don't tend to stick to realistic. Yeah, realistically, none or one, but generally, I would say probably like about two kalas at a time. Because
Okay.
with all the other work I do, like I would say about two kalas a time. And it's also honestly the real challenge is the kalas they're working. These girls are working really hard, and the time that they're available is like my hardest time, which is evening when I have my bunch of kids to put to sleep or collapse at the end of the day. So that really becomes the biggest challenge. But generally, I would say about two kalas at a time.
And well, two callas is basically 20 sessions,
Yeah,
so that's a lot. So if you're overbooked, do you have kala teachers that you recommend to refer out to? Like you do, right? You're not turning a
absolutely.
kala away.
Absolutely. Yes. I'll generally make a recommendation, or I'll reach out to college teachers I know and ask, is anyone available to take somebody on right now, and be able to refer them further.
I feel like that's important too because it's very vulnerable to go find a kala teacher, especially someone good. And
Mhm.
I think it's really nice when you can reach out to someone like when you get just a rejection, no, I'm too busy. But when a kala teacher can make a really nice recommendation, it just feels good. It feels good. It's someone that they trust. And yeah. Of course, there are people complimenting that they took your course and it's totally worth it. Um, so someone's asking, okay, why did we do badikas? And we answered that. Okay, so someone's asking here, what is the reason for having a mikvah lady? Only that the hair should be covered, or does she anyway need to be there?
So she anyway needs to be there because the way the halacha rules is that there needs to be another adult, like basically somebody that we can trust to witness the tabling. And also one of the things is to make sure that every part of her is table in the water. Like for example, the hair that can sometimes like stay up at the surface. We want to make sure everything kind of gets in the water. But that is the most important role of the mikvah attendant. This is where I want to say, like, you don't have to allow mikvah attendants to make you feel uncomfortable and check you in ways that you don't feel comfortable with, because today you can pretty much check yourself. We have mirrors everywhere. You can
You mean
look
no
at
one has to look
everything.
between your toes?
Technically, no. And I think we learned that in COVID when we kind of did away with that, and yet somehow we were all able to table and it was all kosher.
That and
Um,
Pesach cleaning.
that right? Yeah, exactly. So really, I mean, look, sometimes it's nice. Some women like it. They like to feel reassured that someone else looked at them and checked them and said that it's okay. Like it calms them down. Great. But if you're the kind of person who it makes uncomfortable or more anxious, as long as you visibly, like with your eyes, check every part of you to make sure that there's no chatzitza. What that means is that there's nothing that's going to get in the way between you and the water. Then that can be enough. And she just has to actually watch you dip into the water.
And I bet a lot of women don't know this, but their husbands can be mikvah ladies as well.
Yes.
According to halacha.
Yes. Yes.
According to
According to,
halacha, yeah, if you
yeah.
are alone, right, if you have a mikvah in your home, your husband
Hmm.
can be your mikvah lady.
This is correct.
Yeah, I know a lot of you are rethinking this right now. You're like, time to build a mikvah in the basement. Yeah. Someone says,
Yeah.
can it be mandatory for the mikvah ladies to take your course? Well, yeah.
Mm.
It happens to be, though, that there are mikvahs today that are much more on top of this. I do know that there's a mikvah locally, in Brooklyn, that the mikvah ladies are being given courses on psychology, on recognizing abuse, on
Mhm.
helping women in that sense. I'm seeing a shift. I can't say everywhere, but it's good to know that that is happening. Yeah.
Yes.
And if
Yes.
you're not comfortable in your mikvah, go find another mikvah. Like
Yeah,
don't
and
assume that they're all
also
the same.
don't be afraid to contradict the mikvah. Like if you learn something, for example, and you know that it's true and she's contradicting you, just say, let's pull a rev and find out. Like it's okay. You don't have to, the expression in Yiddish is das doch nicht lassen. It's okay. Like if you know something and stand by that. And if it turns out that the rev says she's right, okay, so she's right. Big deal, you know? But you don't have to, like, it's okay to speak up.
Yeah, I've had that. I've had that once where I was in a mikvah and they did call a rav. There was like a differing difference of opinion. Turns
Yeah.
out that the rav that was called paskined not in the way that I had learned at all, and not at all in the way that my rav would have paskined. But they didn't care necessarily what my rav said because it was the rav of the mikvah.
Right.
And I went along with what they had said because that's their rav. But the next day I checked it with my rav, and my rav was like unequivocally, "That's not a thing. You were right." But it taught me something. It taught me that it's important to stand up for yourself. It's
Yeah.
also important to follow hadracha, and it's also important that if that is not your hadracha, it is okay that the next month you can go to a different mikvah. If there's something that
Yes.
doesn't align, there are many different opinions, and they're not all, it's not about right or wrong. There are different ways of life, and it's okay. It's okay if this doesn't align with the way you are, but just know that it is important that if you learn this, you can stand up for what you know.
Yeah, Tara, I want to say here also, because this is something that women either get bothered about or confused about. There's, we tend to think that halacha is like this black and white situation. It's really not. Like Shulchan Aruch will say one thing, and then there's 10 different commentaries defining that one thing and what it means and how it applies to us and how we actually practice it.
And they all
And that's
disagree.
and they disagree with it. They contradict each other. They disagree with each other, which is why it's so important that you have your Rav that you follow and you know, like, this is your hadracha. This is how you keep the halacha. Like, don't compare yourself just because someone else is doing it differently. It doesn't mean that they're doing it better or that you're doing it wrong or that you're right and they're wrong, or that their way is better. Just have your Rav that you can consult with and find out what is the way that you keep this mitzvah. Or sometimes it's just your husband because he's, learning it and the way that he keeps it. But I think that can be very confusing. Like the women start to compare notes and be like, well, I do this and I do that. And it's like, wait, what? You do what? So just, it's okay. Like, yes, there are different ways of sometimes acting out the halachas in real life, and that's okay.
As long as you're actually learning. Sometimes we say,
Yeah,
"Oh, this is what I do," and it's actually you relearn, and you're like, "That wasn't the right thing to do. I made a mistake. I did not
sure.
learn it right as a kala." Not because my teacher did it wrong, but maybe I didn't understand it right. That's why it's so important to keep relearning this. By the
Yeah.
way, a name came in on the chat. I don't know when you mentioned that college teacher from Australia that made this comment about that we're already keeping it better. Someone put the name Mindy Wiesner there. I think that maybe that may
Mindy
have
Leesner
been
is the college teacher from Australia with the big secret that
with a big secret.
yeah,
The
with
big
the big
secret. That's what
secret.
it was. Okay, okay,
Yes,
okay.
that was
Because
her.
you
That
couldn't
was
remember
her.
the name, so someone just posted it there. I wanted to give her credit.
Yes,
All right,
yes.
some more questions. Okay, here, someone asked me this privately. Why is it that Hilchas Nida is a big secret for unmarried girls? Is that wrong?
This is a hard one for me to answer because I still want to do shidduchim. Um, look, I'll say it like this. I do feel that there is a context involved. Like it does mean more to you and it does apply more to you when you're actually going to be practicing it. Like, let's be real. Even all the kashrus classes that we learned in high school meant nothing as much as when we were standing in our own kitchen with the fleshing knife and the paraffin knife and cutting an onion and figuring it all out for ourselves. Like when you're actually practicing something, it definitely has a certain level of meaning to you and it makes sense to learn it then. And I think that's the thinking of let's teach Hilchos Nida to women who are getting married because that's when they actually need to practice it. Do I feel like there is a place where we can start learning these halachas before you're engaged? I do. I do. I don't think there needs to be this big secret around it because what, like, why? It's a regular, normal part of life. It's a mitzvah, just like any other. I always try to rack my brain, and I'm happy for someone to challenge me or give me this answer. But is there any other mitzvah that we're so hesitant for anyone to learn about? I don't know. I don't know that there's any other mitzvah that we're nervous about teaching kids or teaching people in general before a certain time. I, that's my answer. I do think that there is a place and a way for it to be learned. But again, you know what? I'll share with you a story. Somebody who actually did learn it in school. There are, I think in Chabad, they do teach this in 11th and 12th grade. There are, I don't know if that's where she learned it, but in her school, they did learn it. And she said then when she went to Kala classes, there were some contradictions with the way that they taught it in the school, which is in a very Klali way, and the way that she learned it as a Kala teacher, and it was when she was a Kala, and it was a little confusing because the truth is there are many, many different ways of like, you know, the way that law says paskin. And if you're going to take a class that's filled with girls from many different families, chances are not everyone is going to keep it the way that you're teaching it. Maybe that's a concern. So they'd rather it come from a more private place, like from the home. But do I think that this is something that can be spoken about at home? I do.
Especially if we keep in mind that it's not one conversation, it's many smaller conversations
Exactly.
that happen over time.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Nechama, we're kind of like at the mark. I did want to end the call exactly on time. Are we okay if we go just another 10 minutes? I want to get to some of the more questions.
I'm just going to make sure I don't have any SOS messages on my phone. And if I don't, then we're
All right.
good.
Because I feel like some questions here are really nice, and I don't know if we're going to get to all of them, but if we can go over time by just 10 minutes, and we'll keep it to that. All right, we're
Okay.
good?
We're good. We're good. Yeah.
Okay, so someone put over here that everything that you've shared, that we've shared about the Taharas Mishpacha sounds great for the women. But what about keeping those 7 clean days? Because that time, we tend to be in our time of spring, right? Our estrogen is rising. We tend to be more flirtatious. We're feeling aroused. How is that good for our relationship? Especially when usually by the time we go to mikvah, we enter into the other half of the cycle. A couple of days later, the progesterone one, we're less turned on. So like, you know, how would you define that?
So it's interesting. I think
Especially
I
with the
look
knowledge that it wasn't always practiced this way,
right,
right?
right. So I guess the classic answer I could give is like this is a part of Gullus, and it's just one of those things that we unfortunately have to contend with. But just because we have to contend with it doesn't mean that we can't make it meaningful, right? So I think the way I would look at it is if it is if you are really aroused and you are really excited, make that work for you and your husband in a way that you can while you're nida. It's okay. Like count down together, anticipate together. Set yourself up for a beautiful mikvah night together. People, I know that's another thing a lot of women struggle with is like the idea of mikvah night, and men, by the way, also struggle with this a lot. Like the must, like we must be together mikvah night. If you are having all of that, you know, arousal and excitement during that week, use that and plan your amazing date night, and it happens to be your mikvah night, right? I think it's one of the home plays is to plan your perfect night. So why can't that be mikvah night? If that's what you're feeling the whole week leading up to it, then really use that and make it work for you.
I also feel that when you use that, desire doesn't just go away when your hormones change. If you capitalize on the estrogen part of your cycle, then it will come over into the progesterone side. Because I
Yeah,
think when in the second half of your cycle, when your desire is a little lower, it's not really that your desire is lower. It's that your desire is going to be sparked more by safety and connection versus in your estrogen part of your cycle, it's more flirtatious. The woman is a little more outgoing, right? In
mhm,
progesterone side, we're a little more receptive. And so what happens is if we're not capitalizing on that estrogen part of the cycle with communication, with a little bit of
thank you.
flirtation, right? Then of
Yes.
course, once we get to mikvah and we're hitting the progesterone side, we're like, I'm not feeling it. But if we did use that time to communicate and build that level of connection and desire, then you're not going to lose it after mikvah because you're kind of building that safety all along. So,
Exactly.
and I
And I
also
think
feel like,
that's
yeah.
something that gets lost is like the using Nida time. Use Nida time. It's a part of the cycle just as much as your Tahora time is. Make it useful. That's where you learn how to communicate love without just relying on the physical side of things. Find your like find how you communicate that with each other without jumping into hugs and kisses in bed. Learn how to communicate. Like it's a challenge because you are Nida, you don't want to overexcite. So it could be tough to learn, but it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile to figure that out.
So, question from the peanut gallery. What about women who are not menstruating, right? They're on birth control back to back, they're not getting their periods, they're in menopause, they have hysterectomies. Should they be taking your course?
I think yes, obviously,
Obvious.
because I think that there's more to the course than just reviewing the halacha. That being said, like I did share in the beginning, Taras Mishpacha is the framework. So if it's going to be hard for you to hear about a mitzvah that you're not keeping right now, if the reason is that you've already reached menopause and you're not menstruating anymore, and that might be hard for you, then maybe this isn't the course for you because a lot of it really is woven into keeping Taras Mishpacha. As far as women who are, let's say, taking birth control back to back or using methods of birth control that stop their cycles completely, and many of them are doing it because they don't want to keep mikvah, which I think is
Or they're
unfortunate.
nursing
I
clean,
think it's
they're
unfortunate.
okay.
Or they're nursing clean and
Or
they will be keeping
pregnant.
it,
Yeah.
or they will be keeping it again, in the near future. Absolutely take it. Absolutely take it because I think it will redefine what this mitzvah can mean for you, and it will make it less scary when it comes to actually keeping it again. And you might have a very different experience than what you remember. I think one of the saddest things that I heard was actually from my midwife when we were talking about different birth control options, and she shared with me that most of the women today, especially the ones who are starting to marry off kids, they don't want to be busy with mikvah. Those were the words. They don't want to be busy with mikvah. And that just made my heart it really hurt my heart because what, you don't want to be busy with mikvah? Ah, oi, oi, come,
Don't
come,
say, oh,
come.
you sound like every base Yaakov teacher.
I'm sorry, I can't help it. You don't want to be busy with mikvah? That's ouch. That shouldn't
Right.
be. That shouldn't be. Like you should never not go
Imagine
to mikvah.
saying that you're really frustrated that you have to light candles every night, every Friday night, because you don't want to be busy lighting candles because Friday is such a hectic day making Shabbos that like you just don't lighting candles on time is the biggest pressure on your head. If you could just take a shower and then a nap and then wake up when it's Shabbos, right, without having to worry about lighting candles on
Yeah.
time, that's literally what's happening when women are saying they don't want to be busy with mikvah.
Exactly. They're missing out on an opportunity. And I don't mean this in a judgmental way. They're missing out on an opportunity because they don't know the opportunity that's there.
Right.
And that's what I'm hoping to be able to give them is to reignite the passion and show them the opportunity that they can have and the possibilities that exist there and hopefully excite them to want to try it.
Someone is asking me privately, will this course also help for people who are not in the mood to go to mikveh? And I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot. I think one of the things that I always keep myself in check with about is being authentic. And yes, sometimes we're not in the mood. Mikvah is not exciting, whether it's because, again, we don't have the information about how beautiful the mitzvah itself actually is or the powers of the mikvah, or whether it's because what's waiting for us on the other side.
Right.
That can also be the case. And we definitely talk about that and how do we navigate that? What do we do with that? How could we make it special again?
So someone asks about college classes. Can your daughter do it over Zoom or does she have to be coming in person?
I've actually done a Kala over Zoom. I would say like this, it can be done over Zoom. If it's possible, there are certain classes I'd love to do in person, and I'll just give you an example because I know it's not what most people are anticipating. When I do my mikvah
It's not the
class,
toothpaste class.
not the
It's not the
toothpaste
toothpaste
class.
class.
The toothpaste class can be on Zoom.
Okay.
The class that I don't like to have on Zoom actually is when we're talking about the mikvah, because I actually take my kalas to a mikvah and we have the class there. We walk through all the rooms and we just talk, it's not only like a step by step of this is what you need to do, where you need to do it, and how it's going to happen, but it's also just it's different when you like I'll never forget the look of awe on my Kala's face when she like actually got to touch the waters of the mikvah after we just finished learning about how special it is. And she was like, had tears in her eyes. I was, yes, that's what I want. So that would be
None
a
of us
class
had
for me.
that. We were not given tours of the mikveh when we were
Right.
college. That was
Exactly.
not a
So
thing.
if I can do that in person, then I prefer to do that in person. Technically, can it be done over Zoom? It can, but if I have the opportunity to do some classes in person, I just prefer that.
Someone's putting a question here on the chat that she took a refresher years ago, and one woman said she puts on panty liners during the 7 counting days. And she says it's not okay, right? It needs to be a cotton, non disposable underwear,
You
right?
know what? This is exactly how misconceptions start. Maybe she was told by her Rav to put them on for some reason. Maybe she was having a difficult Zayin and they didn't want to be, they didn't want to have certain difficulties or challenges with paskening that Zayin. So maybe she was told to put on the panty liner. I can't tell you. I don't have the context. Would there be a situation where that might happen? It could happen. Um, Run of the mill, is that what I'm going to teach? No, you should be wearing regular cotton white underwear. So I don't know why that woman did that. Either she was not taught correctly, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be that she was told specifically to do that for that one time. But that's exactly how misinformation starts to get out there.
Yeah. Someone's asking if the refresher can also have a mikveh tour.
The
It
refresher
should.
doesn't have a mikvah tour, but it does have a little special something. I'll leave it as a mystery, but
Okay.
we do have a little special something that I like to do for the refresher.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. Let me just. Okay, so someone says, she sent me a private message and she says, how do the 7 clean days and mikvah belong to the woman? I understand the 5 period days, right? But how, I can't relate to the other two.
How it relates to the woman?
Yeah, because, especially since we're discussing that in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, they didn't keep that. It was just 7 days and they were Tahora and that was it. Now there's all of this extra stuff and we say that it's a woman's mitzvah. So I can understand that in the 5 days of bleeding, she needs to take that time for herself. But what about those extra 7 days when she's excited and the mikvah itself, where she basically takes on the burden of preparing herself, leaving her children, all of that. So how is that really beneficial to the woman?
So first of all, can we let's take halacha out of the picture for just a quick second. How would you feel if someone came over to you and said, take an hour to yourself without anyone around you or anyone bothering you? I don't know any woman today that would turn down that offer. You get that every time you need to get ready for mikvah. You're having time for yourself to pamper yourself, to take care of yourself, to make yourself feel clean and good. Look at it that way. If the halacha part is difficult for you and it don't connect with that, so look at it as pampering time. Like this is my self-care time. This is a time that I get to spend with myself in terms of getting ready for mikvah. And about the 7 days, so I think the way that I would try to reframe that for you, if you're open to having it reframed, is because this is how we keep the mitzvah today, because this is the world, this is the generation that we live in, every part of it is its own mitzvah. Every badika that you do is its own mitzvah. And the analogy that I use with my kalas, but if you find it helpful, I'll share it here, is think of a diamond necklace with a 16 stone setting. Every mitzvah, every badika that you do puts another diamond into the setting. Don't you want to have a fully formed necklace? That's what you're doing for yourself. Every time that you keep every part of this mitzvah, you are creating something special for yourself. Now, the only person that's going to make it special is you. I can give you the tools, I can give you the mafarshim, I can give you the midrashim, I can give you the teachings, but ultimately it's up to you to make it meaningful. Do you want it to be meaningful? good, then come and I'll give you some of the tools to help you. But if you don't want it to be meaningful, I can stand on my head and tell you everything that there is in this notebook of mine, and it's not gonna really make a difference.
I
But you can
remember
make it meaningful.
I remember when we learned this, Rachel had mentioned that if you're doing all of the bdikas, you're doing 15, right? You're doing the hefsek, and then you're
16,
doing,
16,
well, that's including the Maich.
including the mic.
Right, but
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
not doing a mic, because a lot of married women no longer do it
Do
because
it
of
anymore.
staining, right?
Right,
So
that's
if
true.
you're just doing the hefsek, which is mandatory, and then you're doing the bedikas, 7 days of bedikas twice a day, then you have 15 total, and that's the same amount of steps that the Levium stood on in front of the Beis Hamikdash. And I was just like, everyone has different things that are meaningful to them. To me, the diamond necklace, I'm like, I'm not a diamond necklace kind of girl. Can you tell?
Right.
Giving me that was going to be like, whatever. That doesn't talk to me. But for me, it was like, oh my gosh, the 15 steps of the Levium. And they're singing. And you know what? I'm married to a Levi. And so, like, there's something there. So I love that when you talk about going back to the beginning of our call about finding meaning. And then even now saying, I can give that to you, but you have to be willing to do this for yourself. I think there's a dual thing. I think women have to be ready to come here and embrace this is your mitzvah. You can take ownership, and the meaning exists. It has always existed. You may not have been given access to it depending on how you were taught. And maybe you were taught by an excellent Kala teacher, but her version of meaning was not meaningful for you. And that's
Right.
why it's so important for us to keep learning because it does exist,
And
right?
also what was meaningful to you can change as well. Like what was meaningful to you when you were newly married, maybe you're ready for something else when you're married for 10, 15 years. I think
Yep.
I think we can always benefit from reviewing this mitzvah because it will always touch us in it like it'll land with us in a different way every time.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, Nechama. How nervous were you before you came on the call?
Really. Very,
you,
very.
you've been doing amazing. I feel like we could sit here and schmooze all night because, listen, it's one of those subjects. We've been talking about it for how many years in the gym? I'm so glad we got to
Yeah.
do this on the call. I'm going
Yes.
to end the recording here. Give me 1 second just to do that. All right. Thank you, everybody who joined us. And stay tuned because there are more calls coming. So we're going to end it right here. Thank you.